good to go. Good to go as soon as you give the nod.
Yeah, so I think if we just start streaming now, we can get started.
That's fine.
Okay, that's us. So welcome everyone to today's People Committee meeting. If I drop off the call, because we're obviously all on electronically, then Tom Halpin will step in and chair until I come back. I'd like to welcome colleagues from HMICS, Trade Union and Staff Association, and for those who are either here for the first time or live streaming, just want to provide clarity about how People Committee works. So when paper are presented, we'll take the initial comments and questions from SP members. I'll then bring in colleagues from Staff Association and Trade Unions to provide comments, not questions. And then if there's other areas that board members then wish to question officials on, then we can take that forwards. So it's my understanding we've had no apologies for this meeting, and no declarations of interest have been notified in advance. Is there anything that anyone wishes to make a declaration or connection about? No. So decisions on taking items of business in private, items 7, 8 and 9, in accordance with our Section 20 of their standing orders, we can take matters in private. Can I just check that members are agreeing to take the items in private that we have indicated we can take in private? And then finally, in terms of administration of the meeting, the arrangements of the running order of the private session, Staff Association, Trade Union colleagues will join us up to and including item 8.1, and thereafter 9.1 will be a members only discussion. So the public minute from the meeting held on the 29th of August. Are people content? Yes, okay. So can we then take the rolling actions? We've got a number of areas here. So mental health and trauma in policing outputs is a proposal to close this, but I'm thoughtful about whether or not we have actually concluded what we've said in terms of discussion required on how to align outputs from the trauma event and overall wellbeing approach, including understanding how we monitor and measure the practical steps. Have we had that discussion, and do we have an agreed way forwards? Because if we haven't and we don't, then I think we need an update.
I think we can easily keep that one open, Fiona, for now, till we get further checks on that.
So when are we going to when are the discussions going to take place, and when are we going to take an overarching approach?
I think what I'll need to do is check with Amanda Coulthard on that. I know she's been doing some work around that, Fiona, so I can't give you an answer there. Darren might have an update as well.
Darren, do you have anything?
Yeah, so there was a meeting scheduled. Unfortunately, Katie and I weren't able to attend, but from discussions that took place, as I understand, there will be a single action plan which will incorporate the specific commitments made as a result of the trauma event, alongside specific actions from the wellbeing programme review. And Katie Susan had advised that that should be coming to the committee at its next meeting in February.
Okay, so I'm suggesting we keep this open then, and we can close it in February. And it would be good to see this moved on, because it's been some time now, I think, since we started the whole notion of moving this forwards. So the next 3, I'm going to suggest the briefing on MSK, the issue on training and re-rostered rest days is proposed to close. Are members content that we close these? Yes.
Fiona, just to make you aware that the item action 3 on training, and we're awaiting an update from Police Scotland on that one, and they have been in touch, and I've gone back with a further ask to make sure they cover all the points, so that'll remain open until we receive that.
Okay, but the other two will content to close. The health and safety reporting, improved reporting on health and safety to be further developed to demonstrate a whole system approach. So we've got an update to say that health and safety manager is in post, but I'm not sure that we've got necessarily the improved reporting demonstrating that whole system approach. Where are we with that, Darren?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've been meeting on a regular basis with Dawn since she's come into the organisation. You'll see a number of changes to this report very positively. You'll be aware conversations around about linked to HSE best practice in terms of formal board level review on an annual basis. And Dawn and I have been working closely together with a view to that coming after the financial year end, but certainly significant developments made, and I know Dawn's working to continue with that continuous improvement approach.
Okay, so are members content that we close then and monitor the health and safety reporting we get? Yeah, okay. That's grand. Thank you very much. Next two we're proposing are ongoing, and we, in terms of recruitment and protected characteristics, we will have a paper brought in public to future committee meetings. Are we imagining that will be at our next meeting? Do we have a date for that? Can we ask for it to come to the next meeting, please? And the reason, if it's not, that will be helpful. And then tackling sex equality and tackling misogyny, we're looking for a paper to plan programme of work, timeline, and details on how progress and impact will be tracked. And I'm suggesting that we wait until we have the discussion about that before we agree to close it, because I'm interested in how will we know. So what are the outcomes going to be, and how will we know and take that forwards, if members are content with that? Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. In which case we're on to, there's no decisions taken since our last meeting. Therefore, we're moving on to the Wellbeing and Inclusion and the biannual Your Voice Matters, an update. And Barry, is Barry online now?
Chair, I'm here, yes.
Yes, okay, over to you. So Barry, just if we assume that we've read it and just draw to your attention some of the high level issues that you think are important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair, for that. And good afternoon, members. This paper, as members will be familiar with now, is the biannual reflection of what has been achieved and delivered in the Your Voice Matters space in the last 6 months, but also a sense of the kind of immediate priorities of progress and how we're going to work together with stakeholders and colleagues to shape the way forward. I think crucially, this update represents at an organisational level, but also divisionally, what that improvement activity looks like as a response to what the survey told us, albeit 2 years ago. I'll start with the implementation plan update, which was Appendix A in the update. We've seen a number of ambitions closed. I think we're at 11 closed and around 7 to complete. And the reason I draw that out is in the leadership space, which is one of the key themes, we've closed down or completed from a Your Voice Matters perspective the majority of actions. Now, the reason I draw that out is through the discussions in evolving and developing the implementation plan, the consensus was leadership was one of the most important, not to say more important other themes, but leadership was one of the real key areas of focus we needed to deliver upon, to respond tangibly and credibly to the survey. The remaining ambitions that are outstanding or are still open, very much still on track. A number of those ambitions have a longer term sort of delivery plan. They're going to take us well into 2024, easy for me to say. So what we've looked at is how can we keep our colleagues connected to these deliverables when there is a kind of a longer term aspiration to get them done. We've created a Your Voice Matters intranet page, which is something that really enables colleagues to kind of connect to how they have been listened to, how we've responded, how we've taken their kind of, well, their rhetoric into consideration. So yeah, if I could speak a little bit about that, it's been a collaborative effort to pull together that intranet page. We've worked with corporate communications to ensure we enable best practice, and it's about creating a connection. And in some cases, it'll be a reconnection for those who maybe completed the survey and haven't really seen any of the deliverables, or in that sense, new colleagues to the organisation in terms of telling that story of what we have done, how we've listened, how we've responded. In terms of that kind of you said we did piece, we've really made an effort to use really kind of understandable language, step away from some of the kind of academia that was very kind of prevalent in the survey responses. What we want to do is create a forum for everyone connect. They can see what has been done and feel some of the difference. I think that kind of emotional connection is really, really important. And that's what this You Said We Did has been set up to achieve. It will be an evolving piece. When other deliverables such as, you know, the kind of milestones in Your Leadership Matters, different kind of deliverables in the kind of policing together, we can really kind of showcase in one single space how that connects back to their voice, if that makes sense. The page itself is led by ACC Emma Bond, who chairs the steering group. She is just a video message just to give a sense of how the exec are still connecting to that piece of work, and I think that's really important to show that accountability and also that commitment moving forward to continue to act upon the voice of what our people have actually said to us. In terms of the last appendix, in the update divisional summary, I think really important to bring to life some of the activities, that kind of localism, if you like, of how divisions have responded to what their unique results were, but also that kind of correlation to the organisational response. I think we know our people connect, they have that direct relationship with their division, with their local teams, with their kind of head of service. So I think really important to bring that to life. And demonstrate at every level voices are being heard, we're responding in terms of that kind of improvement activity. I'll maybe pause there, Chair, conscious of there'll be some interest in obviously kind of questions, feedback. Really, really welcome that, so I'll pause. Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much indeed for that. Comments or questions from members? Alistair? So Tom then?
Yeah, I'm not sure if Alistair's screen's frozen at the moment. Hopefully he'll return shortly. Thanks for that, Barry. And I suppose my question's about, and what do we do with this? I mean, the data's there. We gives us insight and is help. So there's a couple of sort of reflective responses I'd like to elicit. One is about the frequency of how frequent we do it. Are we still satisfied? Because there's quite a gap in between. And, you know, is that still appropriate, or is this, you know, because it's a big issue in the workforce, are the bosses listening to me? You know, does my voice matter here? So that frequency is an area that I'd like to explore the thinking. The other one is about comparability, knowing how we're doing compared to others. You know, there are other sort of industry type surveys, as you'll be aware, where you look at family groups of types of organisation. And I'm just wondering, as we get more sophisticated with this, is there the ability to embed some questions that are maybe would give us the ability to do some comparability across a family of police organisations that would give a really good message back, or give us a real key insight? So that was the two areas that was, and the third one would be, we're gathering some really insightful data here. Is there the ability to look towards our collaborative partners through the Joint Research and Evidence Forum for further analysis of that? I know Davina's on the call today. Maybe she'd be able to offer some insight into that. So that's the 3 areas: frequency, comparability, and the ability to actually do further research and evaluation of that evidence that you have. Thanks.
Tom, thanks so much for, sorry, Chair.
No, it's okay, come back. Yeah.
Tom, thanks so much for those questions. I think, you know, absolutely really valid question. I think in terms of frequency, there's some real kind of rich conversation happening at the moment in terms of what that looks like. How do we, you know, potentially do something that's quite agile, and it's a case of we can measure more frequently, almost on a kind of monthly basis, that kind of pulsing approach. How do we correlate it to some of the insights, the data around our people that we're getting on a monthly basis? So how does that look? What does that look like in terms of how does that link to what the survey told us in the first place? So those conversations are happening, and it's all kind of sort of feeding into this sense of what we do next from a kind of colleague engagement survey perspective. In terms of comparability, I think, you know, what Durham gave us was that kind of sense against a richness of forces in England and Wales. I think the design process, the thinking that I just mentioned, I think will absolutely incorporate that in terms of who is it we want to compare against. I think there's real validity in comparing against other forces, but the kind of private sector, other industries, there's real kind of learning we can absorb in that place. So let's not restrict ourselves by just comparing ourselves to just other forces. So that's very much at the forefront. In terms of your last question, well, auspiciously, my kind of role, my portfolio has moved into Davina's world. So that naturally, I don't know if Davina preempted you to ask that question, Tom, but I now sit in Davina's world. So absolutely, we can see that kind of correlation of data and look at that kind of holistic picture of all the data we have in policing to really tell that story and get in the front foot and respond accordingly. So I hope that answered your question. Questions. Thanks, Tom.
Tom, you satisfied with that?
Yeah, it's helpful because it shows that a lot of that thinking is active and it's going there. It certainly doesn't yet give us, and this is what we're doing. And I think as board members, we're interested in what you're doing. So it's what happens with that. So I've no doubt it's something we'll return to.
Okay, that's grand, thanks. Alistair?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies, I momentarily dropped out of this call, but I think I've managed to reconnect. Thanks very much, Barry. Really clear and very helpful paper. The response to Your Voice Matters is crucial within the organisation. When people take the time to raise issues, of course, what they want to see is that they're listened to and that actually improvement and progress takes place. And I think the paper is a strong indicator that both of these things are actually happening. But specifically, what I would like to ask about is in relation to well-being. Now, you cover this as in the actions are closing. That's in one of the first bits, and then you also give an indication of what's happening at a divisional level. But there's been a lot of conversation recently about the pressures on police officers and staff, you know, particularly in the light of reductions in numbers and in budget pressures, and what that's leading to is an increase in workload, and it also is meaning that, you know, to maintain frontline service delivery, staff and officers are being taken from different departments, all of which paints a picture of increasing pressure on individuals and on teams. And I know we covered this a little bit in a later paper, but that's impacting now. So how is the work that's been taking place in relation to well-being being tied into the hearing now? And how will you evaluate it going forward to make sure that we do, you know, reflect on current circumstances and we listen to the voice as staff about the importance of well-being?
Alistair, thanks so much for that question. I think really, really important. And I hope to an extent what I kind of referenced in my response to the earlier question in terms of that tying in the insights that we have into the other data points that we have that are very kind of rich in that kind of well-being space. I think the kind of collective discussions, albeit informal, we've had about where we want to go in that kind of measurement space is around that kind of pulsing, so that if we got a sense of any kind of key or emerging issue, that we could actually almost kind of canvass our people in real time to understand what that is and where the pinch points are, and then really kind of tangibly respond to what it tells us. So I think it's about that kind of sustained correlation of data, which I think is happening. There's conversations happening, certainly with kind of P&D colleagues in that well-being space, but also that ability to very quickly understand what issues are and come back to people and almost involve people in the kind of response for that kind of co-design of how we need, what we need to do to make things better, if that makes sense. I think it's definitely an area where we need to improve, and we need to have those kind of real kind of meaningful conversations, so we can see all the different data points we have. If that makes sense, it maybe doesn't, but I think probably the key point I would make is that we're acutely aware of how well-being feeds into Your Voice Matters, the kind of broader colleague engagement space, and we want to make those connections.
And I think, Barry, that all the aspirations and the framework, I don't have any challenges around that at all. But my appreciation is that these things take time. You know, to a degree, it's a exercise in cultural change within the organisation. But I'm just acutely aware that there is challenge now. You know, but because of resourcing pressures, and this is impacting on people, and we hear this from multiple sources. So I'm just wondering how, you know, all the work that's taken place, how it helps us today is kind of my question, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely does. And I think it's something we can absolutely take away, the immediacy of the issue. What have we got? What mechanisms do we have to kind of properly understand that and bring our people with us to shape the way forward?
Okay, thanks. Davina, do you have a response to this part before I bring Paul in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to mention that work is underway, as Barry mentioned, in keeping colleagues engaged and involved, particularly in terms of resource prioritisation. So nothing's been published yet, but we've been designing an online dialogue platform which is very open and transparent, and a positive collaborative space for colleagues to submit ideas and share their thoughts and feelings around what they can do in their areas to support financial savings and capacity, etc. So we're looking at different methods at the moment to keep colleagues engaged and involved in a more continuous, consistent way to understand the here and now.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much indeed, Davina. Paul?
Yeah, it's a biannual report, so it's once every 6 months, and I'm looking at the appendix with the various actions and projections, and all the projections, the latest one is in 3 months' time. So can I ask, does that mean that all the work will be finished in February 28th, or other projected dates that need to be delivered? And so why, if it's biannual, then why isn't it going beyond February for those?
Paul, thanks so much for that question. I think certainly the projections in the Appendix A are they kind of connect to the next people committee. I'm not sure if
right.
So
but we won't get something back at the next people committee because this is once every 6 months. We'll get it in 6 months' time or 7 months' time.
I'm not sure I understand
it's a biannual report, so it doesn't come every quarter, it comes every 6 months.
So I think, unless I'm wrong, I thought the dates on the projected next status was in line with the next people committee.
Yeah, but we don't get a biannual report every quarter. The next people committee is the next quarter. A biannual report's every 6 months.
Maybe we could look then at reporting to us, because I mean, I would have thought a more contemporaneous report would be helpful.
We can absolutely look at that, Chair. Whatever is most meaningful. I think as we get down to less ambitions to deliver, that maybe makes sense to have more frequency in terms of how we look at where we are.
So just returning to where I'm coming from, does this mean there's more actions beyond those that are expected to be completed by the end of February?
So the actions that are outstanding are, I think, the 6 actions outstanding, Paul. So those, I think 2 of them stand to be completed the next time we bring a biannual report.
Right.
The other 3, as noted in the paper, are going to go beyond into 2024. So, for example, criminal justice reform, that's a really significant piece of work to really understand how we reduce the amount of time officers spend in court, etc. The continuous improvement piece, that's a longer term piece. It's something that needs to be kind of quite systemic and sustained. I think it's so. Apologies if I picked you up wrong. I think, as the chair indicated, perhaps a kind of conversation around that might be useful.
Well, it's just that those don't seem to have any timescale in them in the appendix. That's kind of where I'm coming from. They're not mentioned there with a completion date or proposed completion date. So it'd be good to know that.
Absolutely, I'll have a look at that.
Yeah,
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues from Unison or Unite, any comments you might want to make? No, okay. The Feds, Federation, David, anything from you, or Chris or Rob from ASPS?
Thank you, Chair. It was just 2 points. One, I think, largely mirrors Alistair's, but just what work has been done to understand the impact of what is effectively a 7-month recruitment freeze and a 2-month training pause on what it is that you're going to be able to deliver at the end of this work, even at 6-monthly phases. And the second point I had was some of the individual issues that go across the divisions that have been highlighted. On the face of them are really positive. One that struck me was the D division stuff about not citing cops for a Monday. Has that been a success? And if so, what work is going, or what are we looking at to try and roll out across the country? Because clearly we are one force, and it would strike me that, on that, even using that example, if we could achieve that type of cooperation, that would have a real benefit on cops' well-being. And if, without sounding flippant, Barry, if you're looking for the reasons or the pinch points as to why cops' well-being isn't particularly great, then I can provide you with a very long list at very short notice. So I'm sure that won't be lost on anyone. Many thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, David, thanks. I think just to remind our trade union and staff association colleagues that it's about comments rather than questions to officials. So I'll take what you've said as comments, David, and I'll turn your first question, I think, into a comment, and correct me if I'm wrong, that similar to Alistair, you're concerned actually about the lag time of what's happening in the here and now and how we get that feedback from officers. All right, in terms of that was your concern.
Yeah, and just the impact of the freeze and the training pause on, what we can possibly achieve through this work. Thank you.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Anything from anyone else? No, so could I ask then, Rob, you want to come in?
Sorry, Chair, it was just a couple of reflections just in terms of, I think, to what Alistair and David were saying about the speed in which the context has changed. Barry's report has a real wealth of activity that the organisation's undertaken over a course of 2 years, but obviously the most pressing matter, for us, both in the immediate term and probably the medium term, is the challenges that we face around about resources and the impact on people's well-being that will create. And the other one, slightly more granular, was just around about, Barry was talking in terms of updating the intranet page fronted by ACC Bond as a means of providing feedback. And I just wondered if there was other methods of feedback, because what we know is those who are sometimes under the most pressure within the organisation have the littlest time to engage with with the intranet and the published updates that are put there at times. That was all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. So I think I'm hearing you make a suggestion that other methods of engagement other than online intranet would be helpful. And I think we'll have an opportunity to have the discussion on, and perhaps maybe at the next paper that Kate is going to present on wellbeing, on issues about resourcing. So I think I'll move us on then to Katie, the Q2 wellbeing report. And obviously assume that we've read it, but actually it would be helpful for you to give us some reflections, or I might bring in DCC Spears to talk to us about the prioritisation that we've got given the budgetary pressures. So Katie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, I'll take the paper as read. I think that, you know, overall it's giving a summary in terms of the work that we're undertaking in the wellbeing space for all colleagues. I think it also does call out, though, particularly some of the themes that are coming out across the workforce at the moment, which, yes, sit within wellbeing space, but perhaps also sit more broadly within welfare space, if I can say that. So under 2.4.4, we start to call out some of the other pieces that colleagues are talking to. So that does start to come into increased levels of work capacity. So some of the other pieces we're talking to, and also perhaps more broadly around kind of recognition and empowerment for workforce, so kind of coming into cultural space. I think we do also recognise within this report that under 2.5.1, we are undertaking an external independent evaluation of everything we're doing in the wellbeing space, so that we can get to that evidence-led outcomes piece, which rightly the People Committee are asking for, around what's the difference that that we're actually making for colleagues. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Comments or questions from board members? Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. You know, thanks, Katie, for the paper, and actually very helpful brief introduction there. You know, that evaluation and leading us towards evidence-led outcomes, that's very welcome indeed. My kind of question is, when I look at all the activity that's going on, and I'm very supportive of it, it does place a lot of emphasis upon individuals pulling support out of the system, is the way that I'm reading it. I just wonder how much consideration has been given to the balance between, you know, people accessing and pulling that support, and that desire to move into the proactive space, you know, perhaps through, and this is not asking for this, but routine medicals and routine fitness tests and all that type of stuff, so that people are in that well-being space and are more likely to access the wider stuff. I just wonder how much conversation's going on around that.
Thank you, Alistair. Appreciate the question. I think there's two lenses, isn't there? One is immediate response to colleagues when they have a point of wellbeing or welfare support, but the other bit is the preventative bit. And not just for us, but for many organisations, that's the harder bit, because by the very nature of that tends to take 12, 24, 36 months for that impact to really start to come about. I think some of the initiatives that we're now moving forward with, you know, so under 2.4.2, we talk about lifeline sessions that we've held with circa 750 colleagues. But underneath that, then we start to get into the evaluation of that, not just a top line evaluation of who's attended, but actually what's the difference that it started to make? How confident do people feel? Culturally, are we comfortable talking about, you know, points of vulnerability in our own welfare and well-being? How accessible is it? How can somebody have a good conversation with their line manager, etc.? So I think I still think there's more that we need to do in the preventative space. And actually, I think in some ways we're probably still doing too much. So I think we've, to a certain extent, put a lot into the mix. Some of it's the right things to do. but coming back to that point of evidence-led and actually what's going to have the best impact for colleagues in terms of resources, either people, capacity, money, etc. I still think there's a prioritisation to come from that. And hopefully we'll get to that once we've undertaken this independent evaluation. You know, we can get some really good insight from that.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Katie. Thank you. There is a lot of interdependency with the work that's going on across the organisation, not least of which is your leadership matters and other things that we will discuss later. But that evidence-led approach and that balance between, you know, that being proactive, being preventative, and being responsive, it's really good to hear the conversation that's going on. So thank you.
Can I ask, I don't know whether it's of Katie or DCC Spears in terms of the organisational risk factors. So looking at Your Voice Matters talks about a lot of officers experiencing fatigue. We've heard that officers and staff are reflecting back on their feeling under pressure. So can I ask what is proactively being done about, you know, the organisational risk factor of a reduced budget and reduced numbers, and what's being done to make sure that individual staff members, whether they're warranted officers or police staff, have a meaningful, manageable workload in the moment just now rather than in the future or 6 months ago?
Thanks, Chair. I can pick up perhaps more on the staffing point, and then if DCC Spears wants to come in with respect to officers. I think on the staffing point, where we're at the moment, we're just under 200 vacancies which haven't been backfilled as a result of the recruitment pause. In addition to which, we know that we already had other vacancies in the organisation. So I think the figure is somewhere around 300 headcount FTE, where we now have gaps in our structure, which we recognise does obviously put pressure on workforce unless we can find a way to either do things differently, more efficiently, reduce, pause, etc. Specifically on staff, there's been a very comprehensive piece of work done through ACCs and directors and with their leadership teams to look at what can be done either in BAU to reduce some of that demand or increase capacity. What perhaps we could get to through automation, and also then perhaps what requires an organisational decision. So a policy change or a big change in terms of what we do. So we have all of that. And what we're trying to say now to ACCs and directors and teams is, for the BAU, do not wait for permission. You are empowered to move forward and to find ways to create that capacity and efficiency with your teams. For the broader piece, we are almost there now in terms of collating all of that and then playing it back to the senior leadership team. That effectively gives us a bit of an indication as to where we think we can reduce demand. And then what we need to look at is, as the workforce continues to reduce, is whether or not we start to balance that out. But it is a challenge. You know, we've kind of reduced the workforce, and then we're looking at re-engineering. In addition to which, we have a methodology called SERR, S-E-R-R, coming on board in January. And that effectively is zero-based budgeting, which starts then across corporate services to look at our redesign and transformation.
Okay. Alan, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of points, Chair. So thanks. And I guess we've seen the move from just over 17,000 down towards 16,600, and with the pause on the next intake, that'll drop a little bit further. So in relation to that, not recruiting in December wouldn't have had any bearing on local policing divisions before the end of the financial year, given their period of training. But that said, that's probably why we're looking at 3 or 4 very specific areas for, you know, your leadership matters right now is about training directed at first line managers, which we see to be really important. We've got the activities, you know, going on just now around local policing remodelling. We're looking at how we can deliver change in a different way. And to that point, we're also looking at how we can recruit differently. So going into the next financial year, We will have a more agile approach, hopefully, to recruitment. We're thinking about as the best approach quarterly intakes, perhaps not. So there is a bit of work ongoing in that space. It's still to seek approvals, but a lot of our energy just now is about how do we maximise the resourcing levels that are providing that local policing service delivery, whilst we're looking at those varying factors. Clearly, what next year looks like, as you know, will be predicated on the budget announcement, but we will be agile enough if the budget is in the right place to accelerate and hopefully bring new recruits into the organisation to quickly plug the gaps that are currently starting to emerge.
Okay, so how confident are we that today and over the next month or two, staff will be given a workload that's manageable and we're not going to be asking the impossible of them? Is that through line management?
So I think largely from an operational policing perspective, that this is their own responsibility of the divisional line management structures that are every place. I would suggest one of the challenges that we face just now, and maybe David Threadgold will have a view, but the challenges officers are facing just now is the complexity of what they're being asked to deal with, where it's greater levels of vulnerability. It's far higher instances of mental health related issues, but we are working as hard as we can to ensure that officers are getting the time back that they are due. But there is an absolute reliance on your first and second line managers who are supporting those teams to ensure that they're looking after the well-being of those staff under their command, but equally the demands that are getting placed on them and the volume of work that they're being asked to do.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. David, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Chair, and I'll try and do this without asking a single question. I do apologise. I agree absolutely with the DCC's comments there. The responsibility for ensuring that staff have breaks is that of first and second line managers. My experience is, though, that they are under such pressure, under such scrutiny for all the reasons that we all know about, that they are not being proactive ensuring that their staff are getting these breaks, and indeed they are not getting them themselves. So the challenges are real, and I see no real let up, and I'm not confident that the situation that operational officers, first and second line managers facing at the moment will get any better at all over the next few months. But the substantive point about the first and second line managers role, I absolutely agree with. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Any other comments from our trade union colleagues or our ASPs? David? Malcolm, sorry, we've got two Davids. David, Malcolm.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just to make a comment on what I hear from members is similar to what's been reflected upon there. The significant pressure of workload, primarily areas that I deal with mostly on a day-to-day basis are within the Contact Command and Control Division and the Custody Division, who have seen a significant increase on workloads and trying to balance their well-being there. The feedback that we do genuinely get, and hopefully the new contract will come in and provide some more assurance, but a lot of people don't really feel that they get what they need from the employee assistance. It tends to fall short of the provision, so hopefully the new provision will do more for them. In particular, I think of my colleagues in forensics who've responded, to cognitive behavioural therapy, which tends to be a recommendation very often when people are exposed to such significant amount of trauma through their work. So it's just to make a comment on that, and hopefully we will see an improvement with this new provision.
New provision, that's helpful. Thanks very much indeed, David. And I think we've heard from the executive about current plans in place. We were expecting that and recognition that it's a stretch, with action ongoing to make sure there's improvements. So I'm going to take Rob, then David Threadgold.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just to your question around about individual workloads, that it is a real area of concern for us. Up until the promotion parade last week, we were sitting with the smallest number of superintendents and chief superintendents in living memory in Scottish policing, and that's for some of our members. That means months where they only get 1 or 2 rest days. We've seen a number of breaches of our workforce agreement, and we're working really hard with the force to try and get better compliance around about that. And that's a really constructive dialogue that we've got ongoing. But this remains a real challenge for us, particularly when numbers of our membership who are acting in temporary are still so high, and superintendents and constables are the two only ranks within the force that are actually sitting under establishment. So yeah, we think that this will be a challenge for us. We really welcome the measures that DCC Spears has kind of outlined, and we know that particularly up until we find out what happens with the budget, there's some real concerns in this area.
Okay, thanks for that. David Seggold.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to follow on from something the DCC said about being agile and looking to replace, those who aren't recruited over the next few months. There will be further consequences in trying to train those who, for example, fall out of ticket with officer safety, and that wider piece, if you like, as to how do we create the capacity to train those who are already and will remain in the organisation, but whose training commitments have fallen, and how do we do that? So I think that's really relevant for the board to know and understand, because this will go beyond just bringing new people into the organisation. Thank you.
No, that's helpful. Thank you very much indeed for that. So as I'm drawing this to a conclusion, I wonder if an action could be that at the next People Committee, we will receive a report on the action that's been taken to make sure that prioritisation of workload and all of the surrounding pieces, whether it's breaks, rest days, well-being, how the action that's been taken to make sure that that is fair and reasonable on a day-to-day basis as well. So if we could have a report on that, please, across officers and staff. So I'm going to move us on now to the ill health, retirement and injury and duty update. Jackie.
Afternoon, members. I will just give a very brief overview of the paper. Work has been progressing with regards to IOD in the review that has been ongoing. The paper touches briefly on the internal audit report, and then following the updates to the scheme of delegation, it now provides the reporting on IHR and IOD decisions made since July to November. That's decisions made by SPA at that final part of the process. It's proposed that the statistics on the SPA approvals are reported to committee on a 6-monthly basis. Happy to take any questions and provide any further information as required.
Okay, that's helpful. Thanks, Jackie. Members, any questions or comments? Or people? Tom?
Thanks, Jackie. In your report, you referenced the 6-month trial for fast tracking. It'd be good to hear a quick update on that. And is it likely to be continued? I mean, is there learning from this? Because the reason it's fast tracked is it wasn't just pandemic caused this; it was a long-standing issue.
So I think it will be a February committee before we were able to give you a kind of proper update on that. It's the kind of 6-month period we're still in that 6-month period, and we do plan to then evaluate it. I think the hope is that it would continue, that the evidence that we managed to look at and evaluate will show that it is a benefit, and that we would then continue with that process.
Okay, Alistair.
Thanks, Jackie, for the report. Previously, part of the challenge in the past was getting appropriately qualified medical practitioners. But looking at the flow through now, it appears to me that we're now in a position where we've got appropriate people in place, and just really looking for confirmation that that is the case.
Yeah, we do. The kind of work really closely with Optima Health to make sure that we do have the appropriate numbers of selected medical practitioners. and obviously that's something that was kind of front and centre of the new contract going forward as well, so that there'll be no drop in service between the kind of change. It's Optima Health that's the proposal. Obviously that's still to be finally approved, but there would be no drop in service between the two contracts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. ASPS, Feds, Unison, Unite, any other comments from our colleagues, staff side colleagues? No, all content with progress. Thank you very much indeed. It's good to see this moving on. ACC Duncan, we're with you for Policing Together then. Thanks, Jackie.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, members and colleagues. I'll just briefly introduce the paper which is with you. So this is the 6 monthly Policing Together and Mainstreaming report. The main focus of this is around our duty to report publicly in terms of the 8 equality outcomes that have been set for Police Scotland, which cover internal and external factors. It kind of consolidates quarterly updates that we provide to the People Committee, and as you'll appreciate, it remains a work in progress. So it's part of a suite of reports that we provide. We've incorporated Policing Together, the implementation plan, in terms of a snapshot of progress on actions, and we've incorporated some qualitative and some quantitative data where it's available through the report. Now that data will continue to develop. It's interdependent on some work that's being done on dashboards that Katie Miller will mention in terms of the strategic workforce plan, etc. And each of the outcomes has a suite of indicators that we're trying to get better at reporting against. But the report's there. Again, happy for any observations or questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Any comments or questions? No. Our staff side colleagues, anything you want to comment or, well, anything you want to comment on? No. Tom.
Well, I just wasn't quick enough. I'm conscious that we've got the Policing Together oversight group, which will also input into this. But I suppose the sense of prioritising, you're talking here about embedding the change and those recommendations and responses to it. But it's about prioritising what you can do, when you can do it, and also doing it at pace. So it's just a sense of where you are with that in terms of the People Committee.
Yeah, so again, the oversight group's really useful in terms of assisting that with an independent perspective. But you know, we have the 4 pillars of structure, which kind of allow us to report on the implementation side of things. But we are prioritising a number of bits and pieces. One is evaluation, so we need to kind of get better at pulling a lot of this information together and showing where we have come from, where we are now, and where we want to get to in the future. And the infographic gives a kind of sense of that up to 2025. But again, the SPA feedback and input in that will be really useful. Second is around policies and practice, so looking at elements such as flexible part-time working, and again, the journey that we've been on with that and where we hope to be into the future. Third piece is around data, which I've kind of referenced. So we need to get better at that to enable the reporting and the ability to kind of prioritise as we go along. And divisional structures is another area that we've been working really hard on. So some of that is reflected in the updates within the paper. So getting a real sense of being able to drive and influence divisional activities across the piece without stifling innovation is something we're trying to get to, and that will focus again with the SWP work into new structures within divisions to report on their people plans. So a key element of that will be Policing Together, and that also reflects in the focus of Policing Together within the Your Leadership Matters training that's been delivered as well. So those pieces should fit together under the overall strategy.
Okay, thanks. Paul?
Yeah, I'm looking at the chart on page 48, which is about police staff resignation rates. And I wonder, is there a particular reason that you know of why white and black minority ethnic community staff are resigning at approximately 2 to 3 times the rate that other staff members are? I mean, it's markedly up from 2020, but even 2020 it was, you know, at least twice as high.
Yeah, thanks. So that is it runs against the other statistics, particularly in terms of police officer numbers. So what we're trying to do is get a bit more insight into that. I mean, the private market is a bit more buoyant, but why people are leaving at that rate, albeit it's a relatively small total number, is something we probably need to dig into a bit more, and that means we need to get better at our kind of exit conversations, etc.
Right. So it's, do you reckon it's the small numbers are just skewing at the percentages?
I would.
Yeah.
From intuition, I would say that. I would say.
Yeah. No, that sounds very plausible to me. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for that.
Okay. Can I ask then the IRG highlighted black minority ethnic probation officers not having a good experience. So what's your thoughts on that? Where are you triangulating your information from in terms of we've got, you know, the IRG, they gave us a report. I think it said minority ethnic officers are not having, you know, we're managing to recruit them into the service, but actually they are reporting that they're not having a good experience.
Yeah.
What action's been taken on that?
Yeah, so DCC will come in. We've held Talk Truth to Power sessions with SEMPER members, which is our largest minority ethnic officers and staff association. So we've kind of heard some similar concerns, particularly around probationers. So in essence, what we are seeing, and I think this reflects what the IRG said also, is that probationers will have a good experience throughout their training period. And then when they go to the front line into their operational environment, the experience deteriorates. And some of that is probably around decisions that are made around where they're posted. Some of those are expedited because of the other issues that you've heard touched on today around shrinking workforce profile and the need to fill gaps in the front line. But also the nature of policing now is it runs red hot from the moment that you arrive in division. So the time to be upskilled, absorb training, work with a dedicated tutor, etc., is something that we're actively looking at. So can we provide an environment in which people can have more time to learn, particularly where, for example, English might not be their first language? You get different dialects around Scotland. We've heard this through other surveys as a bit of a barrier. So we're looking to do a lot in that space. And the last bit is tutor constables. So we're doing a lot of work to develop a more enhanced training toolkit for tutor constables, so that'll help them. But again, the policing together aspect, the experience that we've heard from our staff associations and Talk Truth to Power sessions will be built into that as well to try and remedy that. So we are actively listening and trying to formulate solutions with the staff associations.
Okay, I think that's a bit of reassurance that you're not just passing it off as small numbers in a statistic, that actually you're managing to grab the information you already have and do something with it. So thanks for that. And Alan, I'm assuming your point was made. Thank you. Alistair.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. David, my question is around Serene Livingston back in May. Said that Police Scotland exhibited institutional discrimination, and there's in the report it refers to a survey where you've had over 1,100 respondents, to ask people what their experiences are, what their view, etc. is, and I note that it'll be early next year before you've had time to analyse that and actually give a more formal response to it. But there's a huge amount of work ongoing in this space. Is there anything early in the survey that you've done that indicates you're in the right direction, or there's more challenge for you out there than you were thinking? I appreciate you've not had time to analyse it fully, but I think this is an important piece of work that you've undertaken, and I welcome it.
No, thanks for the question. So it was Davina's team that undertook that piece of work for us, and it has been really useful. I mean, it is early in terms of trying to distill the detailed insight from it, but I suppose the main element to it is it's got a real mixed bag of feelings in it. But the one thing that comes through it is there's strong support for the suggestions that it's the Chief's announcement, the former Chief's announcement, started conversations which otherwise we would never have had. So that in itself, even though the perspectives around those conversations are mixed, means that we've started work which allows things like your Leadership Matters conversation to take place with a facilitator. It's influencing how we all do planning for more interactive training around equality and diversity into next year. It indicates some of the pitfalls around communications and how we do that going forward. But it also indicates probably that a lot of people within the organisation who responded haven't experienced discrimination, or don't feel that they've seen or experienced discrimination. So it probably indicates to me that there is still a lot to do in terms of communicating the experience from minority colleagues who have unfortunately experienced that, and trying to get that through to the if you like, dominant identity within Police Scotland.
Yeah, no, that I do appreciate that it's early, but to get those initial insights, that's helpful. And as you say, even if it provokes conversation, then that in itself is very powerful. So thanks for that.
Okay, if we can move on. So thanks for that, and it's helpful to see the openness of the organisation. I think the success, or when I say success, is maybe too comforting a word, but the impact that the Chief's statement has made has encouraged people to come forwards and the organisation to respond to that. So that's good, and look forward to continuing to see this moving on. Michelle.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so I agree with all of that, and I do think it is really valuable and helpful. I suppose what I'm also conscious of is there's a huge, set out in the report is a huge amount of work and activity and effort, and I think that is absolutely commendable. So I don't want anything that I say to kind of detract from that. But what's missing in there for me is any real sense of how impact is going to be measured. So there have been, in terms of people's staff and officers feedback and comments and references to their experience, there's some really powerful and powerfully negative experiences, and I can see that a lot of the activity that's described is intended to address that. And I think, again, that's commendable, but it doesn't actively say that. It is left to an assumption that that's what we're trying to do. And what it doesn't say, and what we get no sense of, is to date the positive, if any, impact of all of that activity. Because at the end of the day, if all of that activity isn't going to have the positive impact, then you need to be spending your energy doing something else. And I'm not suggesting that that's the case, but we don't know. And the report itself just simply doesn't articulate that, and doesn't give any sense of how you're going to measure the extent to which everything that you're doing is going to make a difference. So what are those people who have had particularly negative and very distressing experiences going to tell you, and how are you going to assess the difference that it's made to them, if any, so that you know that you're on the right track? And so the report it's beautifully presented, it's very polished, it's got a huge amount of activity in it, but it lacks the bite in terms of getting a real sense of what difference it's going to make from my perspective.
Yeah, I I think it's a really good observation. I think that there is work to do in even in the current space about making the logical connection to the outcomes. You know, where we're conducting activity and leading it back. I mean, there is a focus on that, and again, it's responding to what we've heard from surveys and other bits of feedback. Is, you know, what you've told us, what we will do, what we've managed to do, and the next bit is probably and the outcome has been. So I think going forward, that's something we need to include to address your specific point about what we'll ask people. I mean, it's something we're building into our kind of survey work, again, that Davina's led on, getting more adept at trying to use lessons from our activity to inform future surveys, and the institutional discrimination one is probably a good example of that, because that gives you a kind of milestone in the road where we can say that's where we were then, and then when we revisit that, hopefully we'll not just be kind of casting into, right, what was it like before we started all this. And again, there's a bit of work around evaluation whereby we're going to work with the NPCC and others to come up with a sort of evaluation framework which is going to project into what will it look like to become an anti-discriminatory organisation. And it's not simple, it's really quite complex, having looked elsewhere and looking at exemplars from other forces in the private sector. We're going to have to do something bespoke to both Scotland and the Police Service of Scotland. But that's something I think that will enable us to probably develop that methodology that you describe or you're looking for along the way, because we'll need to involve that as qualitative and quantitative data sort of layers within that evaluation framework.
So that's really helpful, but I think one of the things that you just said there is again, I think is really critical, because you said, you know, what will the organisation look like? And actually, that's fine, and it does need to look like what it is, if you like. But it's also what it feels like to be part of, and what it feels like to be on the receiving end of services. So if you're in the community, for example, and you can make an organisation look like what we would expect it to be, if it doesn't actually feel like that, and if the reality in terms of people's experience doesn't reflect that image, then I suppose that's the core of what I'm hoping that you can get to in terms of, you know, some genuine change in terms of how people feel working for it, you know, how they feel when they get up in the morning and think they've got to go to work, but also how they experience the service in terms of, you know, whether it's disproportionate stop and searches of certain groups or, you know, whatever it might be. It's not just about how it looks, it's about how it fundamentally and intrinsically how it is and how it feels to people.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Okay, thanks. Davina?
Thanks, Jay. It was just to mention that we are correlating the public experience with the colleague experience. So we continue to measure user experience, and we've just launched a hate crime survey as well, and continuing to do focused engagement with minoritized communities to understand what they need from policing to start to build trust and confidence, but correlating that with our internal culture and colleague experience and expectations and needs. So going forwards, we're hoping to bring all of that insight together so we can start to align, well, colleague experience with public experience, but also how culture change is being embedded in the organisation is having an impact on minoritized communities and vulnerable groups. So a lot of that work has started, but it continues to evolve as well, and it's been linked into the Public Confidence Governance Board as well, if that's helpful to know.
Okay, no, that is helpful, Davina, and I think we'll just stay with you for sex equality and tackling misogyny.
Thank you. So I'm here today on behalf of ACC Emma Bond, who's on annual leave. So ACC Bond leads the Sex Equality and Tackling Misogyny Delivery Group, which is overseen by an oversight group, which is chaired by DCC Graham. So the report that we've circulated is a summary of the update of the work. that's in place just now and which is planned with a comprehensive action plan as well that's been delivered by ACC's delivery group. I'll just quickly highlight some of the key areas and themes that's been addressed just now. So action is being taken under the 4 key areas, which are focused on the areas that colleagues highlighted during the colleague engagement that we carried out towards the end of last year and into this year. So there's 4 strategic themes that we've identified and focused the action plan around as being the critical areas that matter most to colleagues, which are identified as being the key enablers of sexism and misogyny. And they centre around, well, culture and leadership, HR policy and practice, communications and engagement, with several actions underway at the moment. It looks at a review of our estates and working environments, HR policy and procedures, and demonstrating inclusive behaviour in recruitment and promotion assessment. So reviewing how we currently do things and looking at how we can enhance that with the workstream leads across the service. In terms of culture and leadership, conversations have started with all senior management teams and divisional management teams about a few months ago, and they will continue into the new year. And that's really for raising awareness of the colleague insights and experience, and how sexism and misogyny, in whichever shape or form it can be, the day-to-day microaggressions to more kind of extreme inappropriate behaviours. So just raising awareness how sexism and misogyny can play out and the impact that that has on colleagues. To help build commitment for change, raise awareness of the issues and how leaders and colleagues and peers can look out for behaviours and impacts on colleagues to help support their well-being as well, and how to make a difference in their areas. So it's really about, the focus is on creating that safe environment, understanding what that safe environment looks like, and providing support systems for colleagues to raise concerns and challenge inappropriate behaviours, recognising those who work towards this and support their colleagues when they are raising issues or calling out behaviours, and also crucially how we can best support managers through this process too when an issue or concern has been raised. In terms of working practices and estates, there's scoping and development work underway to develop action plans around fair and equitable access to training and a review of working practices. So that's quite a big part of the work at the moment, which is reviewing, as I mentioned at the start, how we do things and is that still fit for purpose for colleagues. And we're very much keeping colleagues engaged and involved in shaping how we do things and building on good practice. So we've engaged colleagues so far in terms of what is the problem and the impacts of that based on their lived and living experience. And now we want to kind of re-engage them to help develop and shape the solutions and actions so that they're appropriate and relevant to them. And also, as we've mentioned in this meeting, how do we best measure progress and the impact of change going forwards? There's also a dedicated intranet page to the work like we've done on Your Voice Matters, in terms of colleagues being kept informed in terms of You Said, We Listened, and we're working on. And we've launched 2 online platforms for colleagues to share their ideas for change, and also using a new innovative approach, which we've used recently in Wallistown with teenage girls. And that's asking colleagues to send photographs of what they might find inappropriate or misrepresentative across our estates, but we're also asking for images and examples of positive practice as well that we can roll out across the estate. So those engagement platforms are now live, and we'll gather that feedback over the next 4 to 6 months. So the next steps are really continuing to shape the work and benchmark good practice, hold more learning sessions on sexism and misogyny and how we can best address that as colleagues or managers. And actions are being taken forward by the cross-service steering group who are responsible for these key areas, and they meet regularly on a monthly basis. We're also going to be looking at the findings of the HMICS culture inspection report, just to make sure that those key recommendations are also incorporated in the overall plan. So thank you, and happy to take questions and feedback.
Okay, thanks, Davina. Members, comments or questions? People content with Michelle?
Yeah, sorry, just fiddling with these buttons. So really pleased to see it again, all of this activity, and particularly welcome, you know, your emphasis, Davina, on actually checking out the impact that it has. And again, I know, you know, the kind of column down the right hand side, which is about performance measures, I think is fine. But I'm not sure that it quite captures some of the things that you've said. So I welcome the way you've said it, and that would be really helpful if that could be reflected in the report, so that there is that emphasis on outcomes as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. We'll take that on board.
No, that's helpful, because I think in terms of the closing off the action, that I think it was that whole how do we know and what would the outcome measures be, and if you can integrate that in, Davina, that would be helpful. Comments from our staff associations or trade unions? David Sedgold.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support everything Davina has said, and it's a really interesting, really quite inspiring read. In preparation for this, you know, the conversations that I've had with, you know, all ranks up to Chief Inspector are, you know, real concerns about this moving from being an aspiration to being deliverable, especially against a backdrop of, you know, that we are going to have, and I know a lot of my comments are coming back to this, but, you know, we will be losing hundreds of police officers over the next 6 months. We will have a pause on training, and we will have to pick that up again once that's completed. And how much of a priority can this work be whilst we are trying to, for example, bring people back into ticket for OST? We also have, as an observation, and it's been made many times, real concerns about the way that we are going to try and change the culture within the organisation. You know, can that be done in an online space? The evidence from the independent review group report would suggest that that cannot be done effectively, especially for those who are in operational roles. So those who are, you know, by the very nature of the role, engaging with the public, how do we change their culture and their behaviours in an online space? And I'm not sure that anything that I have seen since Ian Livingston's comments has really, you know, the feedback that I've had, that hasn't really changed. And whilst we clearly have issues that we must address, we have a considerable amount of work to do in this space whilst those pressures exist that I mentioned at the start of my comments. Thank you.
No, David, I think that's a fair reflection, and you know, at the People Strategy and Strategic Workforce Plan discussions that we had, the whole issue about online versus in person, I think we did rehearse that, and we need to be mindful. You know, I think we are all circling round very similar issues about how do we keep a service running, how do we support staff's well-being and the workforce pressures. And I think we need to look to, you know, the whole service, but the executive, to make sure that monitoring and measuring outcomes, putting appropriate systems in place. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's similar to David and the SPF, really supportive of the work the force has undertaken in this space, whether it's the sexism, inequality, tackling misogyny work, or the broader policing together space. Really supportive of the moves. And I guess we're probably drawn to ask some of the same questions as members have. You know, having publicly made a statement about institutional discrimination, you're then naturally drawn to asking, well, when won't we be institutionally discriminatory anymore, and when can we say, and how can we say with credibility that that's no longer the case? And that takes us to some of the, you know, the same spaces around about how are we demonstrating outcomes, how are we measuring the change that's taking place culturally. And I guess I would reflect that, you know, the reality is there's still probably a fairly significant group number of people within the organisation who probably don't accept this premise. So we understand that there is an argument, both an intellectual and an emotional one, out there to be made and won in order that we can move this work on. And I think we just have to be careful that as we become a more open workplace, more comfortable having conversations about race, sexuality, gender, misogyny, etc., it may appear in the kind of immediate to shorter term that things have got worse, because people are more inclined to come forward and talk about some negative experiences. So I guess what we would say is to have the faith and keep courage with the direction of travel through, you know, any increase in reporting as we become much more able to better understand the experiences of colleagues from these marginalised groups, for example. So yeah, we're supportive of the work undertaken in this space.
Okay, that's helpful, and as you say, I think we're all, including the executive, saying the same, and it's just making sure we move forwards in a way that delivers what we need and we want to have delivered. So if we close that then on the action, are members content that we close up, Tom?
Just one point before we. I mean, I do just for clarity, I think this action's closed, but it's how do we ensure that those activities are happening in other bits of the business? Because the big statements that were made by the Chief Constable at the time was around institutional discrimination. It wasn't all about behaviours, etc., and necessarily it could be unintended discrimination, etc., just unconscious of it. I mean, where I'm coming from, today's reporting in the media even talks about within reclassification of sexual misconduct allegations. Now, into a category other. Now, there'll be a reason for that. I'm not questioning that or whatever, but if that systemic change is happening and it's in areas that are related to this, how do we make sure it's all joined up and changes like that are made in the full consciousness of institutional discrimination, and it being very, very I don't know if the word's obvious, but certainly transparent exactly where we are with this. Does that make sense? That there's changes happening in other bits of the system that are not directly related to the work of tackling misogyny, but classification of sexual offences are part of that wider discrimination. How do we join up the change?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. David, you want to come in?
Yeah, so as has been observed, the SETM work sits as part of policing together under the overall strategy. So points like that will be picked up through intersectional work. So for example, the prevention side of things is run by PSD, so reclassification of something within the PSD space would be checked across with Emma Bond's group, and overall we will check across implementation plans to ensure there's congruity between a change to one part of the business versus the other. But I suppose from Mr. Halpin's point of view, it's ensuring that we maintain the structures in place that can actually do that and cross-check as we go along. So it's a good observation, but the system that's in place governs for that.
You content with that, Tom? I'll let Davina come in first then, and then Alan, and then come back to Tom.
Thanks. It was just to mention that the work's also closely aligned with the Violence Against Women and Girls implementation plan as well, if that's helpful to know, just to make in terms of making those strategic links.
Thanks, Davina. Alan?
Yeah, just to reinforce a couple of points that David's made, and it's a really valid question, and probably in part that's why we've created a policing together portfolio, and we're putting a significant amount of resource into that, and we're going to realign PPCW into policing together as well, because there's a commonality of themes. But I guess, Tom, in the medium term, most of the themes that's been picked up here do sit under the professionalism portfolio, so that makes it important that I drive some of this forward, take it through our senior leadership board, and I guess face some of the tests and challenges at either this committee and at the Policing Together committee. But I think when we come together in a couple of weeks' time, there's a considerable amount of work ongoing in a different range of areas, all manner of training, how we deliver leadership, and a number of other things. And to a very much earlier point that Michelle Miller had made, we obviously have to somehow at some point measure the progress that we're making. And I see a fair reliance on listening to the lived experience of our officers and staff in this space being really important.
Okay, that's great, thanks. And that obviously is looping us back to the kind of your voice matters and how everything is fitting together in this comprehensive way. So thanks for that. I think we move on now. Katie, Q2 MI and workforce.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper just represents our regular reporting to People Committee. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks for that. Any comments or questions from members? It's a routine report. Any comments or questions from our staff side colleagues? No. Okay, in which case, if we move on, still with you, Katie, then to the policy and procedure development papers.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper just represents a new approach that we want to bring, just to bring a little bit more governance and oversight to policy review and development. So I'm talking about employee policy and review and development within the organisation. We have some circa, I think it's probably about 70 policies or procedures in place. So this really is a framework in which we will move ahead in terms of prioritisation of review and development of that policy. So that gives further assurance to People Committee around the programme of work that we'll develop in line with this framework. And then the questions that you raise about perhaps where we're at with reviewing particular policies, you will have oversight of that programme of work. So I'm happy we've worked with the trade unions in relation to this. I don't know if David Malcolm would want to come in, but I think it also helps trade unions in terms of planning facility time and the work that's in the pipeline for them too. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Katie. And I think this is the first time we've seen this, so welcome it coming to the committee and look forward to further iterations. Any board members, are you content with this information? And we look forward to continued ongoing dialogue about it. Staff side colleagues, any comments or questions you would want to raise? Derek.
Hi there, Chair. First of all, apologies, my camera's not working. So
don't worry.
I just like to say we welcome the process that Katie set up along with Murray and the policy team to look at these, because there is a lot of policies that we look at, and there's a lot of police officer policies that we get sent to as well, which we don't need to see, and is causing certainly a backup from my perspective. So we welcome the opportunity to work with Katie and her team to reduce that and to have a programme of policy events that we can timelessly work on and reduce the workload.
Okay, that's very, very helpful to know. So when will we get a next iteration of this paper, Katie?
We'd be looking to bring this back quarterly, just to provide an update around the work and kind of progression through.
Okay, that's fine. We'll look forward to that in our next meeting. I'm going to suggest we take a 10-minute break now. So if we could come back at 20 to 3. Welcome, and looking forward to hearing the top level issues that you want us to note from the health and safety report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'll take the paper as read, but just to highlight a few things. One of a couple of changes I'll probably want to mention. The strategic plan that is in place, the 3-year strategic plan, is coming to an end in March next year, which is great timing for me in terms of being able to put my own strategic plan together. I'll hopefully wish to continue the progress, obviously, that's been made and continue that improvement. However, I will look to focus on things that I've started to see that need to perhaps be changed, including things like utilising the digital solutions that we have available within Police Scotland to enhance efficiencies, but also learning and engagement. And that will hopefully as well provide more evidence to yourselves to demonstrate compliance as well, just to provide that assurance going forward. The other part that I'd like to just bring to highlight would be page 8, where a paper I've already submitted has gone to Professionalism Assurance Strategy Group, and tomorrow we'll be going to the Professionalism Strategy Engagement Management Board, and that's to propose a new thematic health and safety audit process to replace what we currently have, which is the Certificate of Assurance. Again, this is really to get a real focus on what the really bringing to focus on highlight the areas where we do need improvement, and I think it will help my team focus their efforts a little bit more. And so far that has had improvement, and will go up and will be brought to this People Committee in the next quarterly meeting. So that was the key parts I wanted to highlight, but I'm happy to take any questions.
That's helpful. Thanks very much indeed. Members, any comments or questions that you have? So it is a comprehensive report, Don. In terms of, I'm just looking at the page, I'm looking at progress implementing actions in terms of the preventative activities assurance programme. We've got 62% progress implementing actions. What does that mean? Does that mean things are routine and in progress, or does that mean we've not yet managed to respond to 38% that we would have wanted to? You're on mute, Don.
Apologies.
Don't worry, easily done, easily done.
Yeah, so I think what has happened is, in terms of where that's actually carried out by estates, not by ourselves, which again I must apologise for, that it's misrepresented in the report. But I will say that I think that what's happened in terms of the estate is that they've just had to push forward with other priorities. The 62% they've managed to get, this 38% they're still needing to make some improvement on, but it would have been hoped that we would have got a report from estates at this committee. However, that's been pushed to the next one, so hopefully we'll get more insight into that at the next People Committee meeting.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Don. Really appreciate the report. A couple of questions from me. I welcome, as you do, the opportunity you have to review the strategic plan. But when I'm just looking at the progress to date, there's a few things that are in each of the 4 areas that are not complete. So I'm assuming that these will be completed, or will they carry on into the next report? And then just a couple of specifics that have come out of this report. One is in relation to the flooding and the production stores that you highlight within the report. And I think you're still awaiting from the States an update on that. It's just looking for some reassurance, I suppose, that it's being actioned as a priority. you know, the last thing anybody wants is productions to be damaged, and then inactivity to exacerbate that. And then I'll also note in there that you've highlighted one of the RIDORs in terms of OST. There was an injury to an officer that required surgery, so just wanted, you know, to comment on that, and hope all is well with that officer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Alistair. I'll come to the first one about the keeping or closing of improvements. The strategic plan, sorry, yes, I will be scrutinising that very thoroughly to see if there are areas that did not get completed when they should have, in terms of the end date of 2024, to see if there is still work to be continued. And yes, absolutely, if it feels like that is necessary to stay, it will remain in the strategic plan. Anything that we can close off before March 2024, we will, and I'll give an update as to the where we are with that at the next People Committee. The flooding of, unfortunately, the storm damage was in these areas was quite significant. However, what I would say is that the good work between estates and the production teams to make sure that those productions were safely stored elsewhere until repairs can be carried out. I do know and have had full assurance that these are being prioritised by the estates team in the West to make sure that they. That said as well, the transformational group as well may have some input into that as well going forward about how we look at that going forward in the meantime. The other thing in terms of the RIDOR, yes, there was a significant report carried out by one of my health and safety advisors into this, and recommendations have been made to OST on the back of that, and hopefully will be implemented. I haven't had an update as to the welfare of the officer that we mentioned, but I will. I do know that they were on the mend, and they had received the help and assistance that they were needing from the wider force.
That's good to hear, and thank you for that. Those responses, Dawn.
Thank you.
Thanks, both. Tom?
Dawn, it's about the surefire earpieces. You're part of that. About there's a lot still to be distributed, and there's some divisions that need to be prioritised. But also, it seems to read from it there was an issue of officers taking up the use of them when it's actually regarded as PPE equipment. So the question is, should it be mandatory? And what risk does this pose to the organisation if it is about non-use of it?
Yeah, thank you, Tom. One of the things that I'm actually looking to do with the teams is I've asked the advisors to really focus in on risk here, prioritising, if they can, the areas where there is an element of risk. And you'll see from the report there that we think in really public order has been one. I think the distribution of it has been that there was obviously trial set periods with the bigger divisions where it was felt that they would have more, the sort of the events, the football, for example, being in the highlighted areas. But moving forward, we are actually progressing with this as much as we possibly can, and pushing it as much as we possibly can with each of the divisions. The implications of not having it could, that was something that we are pushing. So,
if you don't mind, Chair, I mean, I'm thinking of the construction industry where for the original adoption of health and safety PPE was resisted by the workforce and all the rest of it, and then there was very punitive responses to that by the courts towards the employers, etc. So I'm pretty concerned about this as an issue when it's declared as a PPE requirement.
Yeah, this has been on my reports going through the sort of governance within the force. So this has been reported and will continue to be until there's progress on it.
Chair, might need an action on this one. I don't know if your own views.
Yeah, no, I think if we could have that brought forward to the next meeting, maybe?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, any comments or questions from our staff side colleagues? David Thetgold.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to say we work well with the service and the health and safety aspects of it, and we've got some very well qualified people within the SPF who can conduct their own separate investigations. Very briefly, I echo Tom's concerns around this, especially after Moonbeam, where there were a significant number of officers who were subject to the type of injuries that could have been avoided if they'd been wearing this kit. And it seems to me that, whilst I don't know the detail of it, that it should be not a choice but a requirement if you're likely to go into situations where we are seeing escalations in violence and public disorder. We would be very, very keen to support that through any change of working practice that was required. We will support. Thank you.
Well, that's very much appreciated, because actually there is little more important than the safety, both psychological and physical, of the workforce. So this is an incredibly important piece of work. So Dawn, thank you for that. Look forward to your ongoing reports that you'll be having, or you'll be giving us, and look forward to picking this back up at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. DCC Spears, the biannual Your Safety Matters report.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And folks, afternoon, just let me draw out one or two key points from the report. I think firstly, I just want to highlight that we remain really committed to the structures that supports Your Safety Matters, and only last week I chaired the Your Safety Matters Diamond Oversight Group, which was really well represented across the force and supported by the staff associations. So notwithstanding many of the challenges we have, we are maintaining the structure and focus that's on that, and we continually review particular divisions and put the spotlight onto divisions, and we did that only last week, looking at Lanarkshire and Ayrshire. Contained within the report, you'll see some high-level updates, particularly around impact factors. I don't think those impact factors will come as a big surprise, and then the location where we're adopting tactics, showing the street, the dwelling house, and the two areas that are really featured within other is one is police vehicles, and again that varies by division, and we're looking at the geography associated with that, and it obviously looks at matters that come into the custody space. You'll see a margin reduction on the assault of any emergency workers, and I don't really say more than that. There's way too many instances where officers and staff are the subject of assaults, and a fair proportion of them continue to lead to injury. So we're working really hard in this space, and the report sort of speaks for itself. So I'm happy probably just to pause here, Chair, and take any questions that you or the committee might have.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments or questions from members? Alistair?
Yeah, thanks for that. DCC Spears, welcome the report, and the emphasis is put on the safety of officers and staff through this work. One of the areas in there is it Op Hampshire, it's called, where you're looking at learning from best practice from across the UK, and I'm assuming from that there'll be a degree of benchmarking perhaps takes place. Could you just expand upon that a little bit, because anything we can learn from anywhere, that helps will be useful, but equally I'm sure there's a lot of good practice through the work that you've done that would be beneficial to other forces across the UK.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Hampshire's designed to do, Alistair. It's designed to look at what's working well, what could we do differently, what is the learning that we can draw from other forces, but at the same time, what learning can we share? It might actually be given the kind of locus of this committee. It might be something that we should consider bringing back. Just a short summary that does look at the benchmarking And we can quite easily do that per head of our population or police officers versus the populations that we do serve. I mean, the data in this report is incredibly high level, and I think some on the call will have been at the oversight group where we're getting to quite a considerable level of detail and looking at lessons learned. So I think what's working particularly well in our own structures is our ability to look at what's working well in Lanarkshire and what could we bring into the Highlands and vice versa. So there is a lot of data shared, but I just wonder if it would be worth us commenting at the next committee just a little bit on our experience of benchmarking and some of the key lessons learned.
I think that would be really helpful, Alan. Yeah. Thank you for that offer. Any comments from our staff associations or trade unions? David Threadgold.
Thank you, and apologies for taking up so much airtime, but I think on this particular subject, it would be remiss of me, whilst I absolutely understand the reasons why we have to have a pause on training, that the message here is almost contraindicated in that, you know, we're talking about, you know, really quite positive messages, whilst at the same time we are pausing officer safety training for 2 months, which will have an initial and then a subsequent impact, as I've discussed. I think that, you know, those two are linked, and whilst I understand that Mr. Spears will, you know, policy that decision, it is significant, and we do consider it to be, you know, a real challenge for the service and those who are trying to deliver it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. It's really just to say again, we are engaged with this work. And to Alistair's point around about benchmarking UK-wide, certainly my understanding is Police Scotland actually stack up really well against what's in place in the rest of the UK, and in fact in some cases are probably UK leading around about some of the work they do. Similar to David, knowing the effort that it took to get the force back in card after the coronavirus pandemic, the training pause will present challenges and will have to be managed carefully. However, we understand the reasons for that, but again, really just to commend the work that's ongoing under the Your Safety Matters panel.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. And DC Spears, you've been with us at the People Committee before, and you've talked about the training pause and the benefits and disbenefits. So I wonder if you obviously want to respond to that.
Yeah, it's came up a couple of times, so I think I totally understand David's position on it, and I've had a difficult task of post-COVID trying to drive progress around getting officers trained on our enhanced officer safety training programme. What we have done is we've looked very, very closely at the number of officers which were scheduled to be trained throughout the kind of festive period and into January, and those numbers were particularly low. And our commitment is that we will quickly and efficiently address those officers who require training late January, early February when that kicks off. So it's just really to give the committee an assurance that we've looked carefully at that and balanced out the need to get a smaller number of officers trained versus trying to keep them in their local policing divisions supporting the communities that they're serving.
No, thank you very much for that. We'll make a note of that. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move over back to you, Katie, in terms of the My Career evaluation.
Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you is evaluation of My Career, which has just run its first annual cycle. So from 1st of March, 1st of April to 31st of March. Essentially, it's calling out a number of pieces now emerging as feedback, so primarily in 2.5.3 are the key aspects which we will now be considering as we move forward into the next cycle of My Career. And happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, questions? No. Katie, can I ask, there were a couple of areas that I wasn't clear on in terms of the percentage of people using My Career who were seeing it as a career opportunity. There were two. There was a large percentage that said, you know, that they were looking for career opportunities and upward progression. And then there was a smaller percentage of people who were using it. I think a smaller number of about just over 2,000. Do you have any clarity about those who engage in it? If it's all upward progression, or are they seeing this as a job enrichment opportunity as well?
Thank you, Chair. I think in 2.4.1, we call out the kind of overarching percentages in terms of the results from the analysis that we've undertaken. I think what that would overall demonstrate is that there's a slight difference in use or perception of my career between officers and staff. And within the feedback themes, we call about the purpose of my career and a link to national promotions or future promotion. And I think because of that link in this first cycle, we've seen a slightly different position by officers in terms of using my career for that evidence for promotion. I think what it is showing as overall evaluation is that for the number of officers particularly who want to lead or move into a leadership role, it's about 16%. So that's just over 2,000. And I think obviously what we're seeing there is, on the one hand, that's superb that we have that aspiration and the appetite to develop. But on the other hand, it is showing that, you know, we just would not have the availability of potential posts for those officers. So I think it is now working with the resourcing team and others around that whole promotion cycle and just being clear on what the pipeline looks like when opportunities will become available. So I think it's for first year, I would say that it's actually had a greater uptake than probably I've experienced in other organisations where you've got something new. Now this is about for year two being really clear on purpose, outcomes, and even where people have identified training through my career, actually how to satisfy that training request, the demand, etc. So there's work that we need to do, Chair.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Tom?
Thanks for that. There was actually I picked up this point. It was 2.5.3. They need to improve our culture through one-to-one discussions, and we're hearing about the huge an organisation that's running hot, is the way it's described. You know, it's about creating that time and ability to have those discussions, and then also when the comment about reflective logs, under 50%, I know it's nearly 50%, we're either positive or neutral about it, but that means you've got the same amount who are the opposite of that, the other side. And so there's a hearts and minds and showing that it works to people. So that with the one-to-one and the reflective, is there a big issue about take up for the larger group of employees rather than that group that are motivated by career advancement? We've got another motivation there.
Thank you. If I could take your second question first, Tom, if that's all right, on reflective logs. I actually am going to say I don't think that's a bad statistic. For the first time, an organisation of this scale introduced something like my career, we're going to expect some sort of insight around that actually perhaps we hadn't picked up before. So I just see it as really useful insight now that starts to make us think about what next in terms of my career. I think around the one-to-ones, it's interesting, isn't it, that how do you move from being less prescriptive as an organisation about, you know, how frequently you need to have a one-to-one and what the structure of that might be, and it feeds into the conversation we've just had about well-being. You know, if you can make 10 minutes, it doesn't need to be 60 minutes. If you can make 10, 15 minutes regularly to get to know your team members, to understand what's going on, to recognise differences in them, to understand what's happening outside of work as well, you know, for that engagement, that's actually where we need to start to get to. And I think that's where I start to see one-to-ones, not only in building relationships, but also perhaps more so for staff, the clarity on what their organisational objectives or goals are. And it comes back to the earlier discussion we've had around creation of capacity. Well, it's almost, if you don't have those performance objectives, how are we clear that they're strategically a priority and aligned, etc.? So I think all of that sits in this space.
Happy with that, Tom? Yeah, so obviously first year looking to build on that and see improvements as we move forwards. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. If I'm being honest, I think Katie's basically answered the question that I had. It was really very much related to what Tom was asking. So a wee supplementary to me really would be, there's a big ask for this. It's covering a lot of different areas, and given the importance of just spending time with your line manager, I would try to do too much with this approach, because it's looking at promotions and access to training and lots of other things. Or have we got the balance right? Are you reflecting on that as part of end of year one?
Okay, so I think it's a reflection. It's almost two bits for me. One is process and how do you kind of evidence that process, but the far bigger bit for me is culture. So how do you make time? How are you concerned about your staff? And in some ways you don't need a process to do that. You know, that comes back to culture and leadership, etc. So I think it's both of those things actually. And I think around the tipping point, what will switch people off to something like my career is if it becomes bureaucratic, if it feels like it's becoming cumbersome. And that's exactly what we don't want to happen. It's got to be about engagement of staff ultimately, you know, career aspirations, well-being, clarity on goals, etc. I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think for year one, a lot of good insight. We refine, we continue to work, and we might accept that we have an overarching my career, but there's slightly different purposes for officers and staff, but we need to work through that.
Yeah, no, that's answered my question, and thank you for that.
Okay, thanks, Alistair and Katie. Staff side, trade unions, any comments? David, Malcolm?
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment on that. As Katie's just pointed out there, there's two different approaches there on my career for staff and officers, and certainly the feedback I get from members is quite a lot. This feels familiar to previous appraisal systems that have been applied. I think the observation that I'd like to make is, as you're looking at the management data today, you're seeing that people are exiting the organisation in order to take another career or progressing career, and I think that is quite indicative of, you know, the lack of being able to progress for staff within our organisation.
Okay, that's a helpful comment and feedback, and I think from what Katie has said, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Katie, you can confirm or otherwise, that's going to be something that needs to be looked at in terms of, you know, what people's aspirations are, because clearly the wisdom and knowledge and understanding that experienced staff have is incredibly valuable to the organisation. So again, to me, it's showing the intersection of things like, you know, your voice matters, my career, you know, leadership development. How do we make the organisation attractive enough in terms of a place to work for people to want to stay? Anything to add, Katie?
I think I would agree with David's reflections, particularly around staff. And actually, I think we need to turn the volume dial up in terms of, you know, thinking about succession, for example, for staff, career paths, etc. So I would agree, yeah.
Helpful, thank you very much. Then we're going to stay with you, and I'm not sure that it's necessarily a companion piece, but actually the people development evaluation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this paper is a evaluation from a training pilot that we had. If we could think about your leadership matters in its most simplest terms about leadership impact and how we do things, the people management program is about the what. So in section 1.1, we highlight the 7 pillars that sit within this program of training for staff. And I think from the pilot, we had, I think it was 177 colleagues took part, 97% would recommend it, and 97% feel that they would be able to apply their knowledge and experience after. So what we're looking to do is to roll this out. Following the evaluation, structure content will remain pretty much as it is, but we're obviously cognizant of the recommendations in 2.3.1 and we'll continue to work with those. But this programme really becomes one of our signature programmes now for staff to help them with their line management roles. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Members, anything you want to ask about this pilot evaluation and rolling out? No, I mean, I think it's something I think from all organisations, staff believe that it's important that the line manager treats them fairly, treats them well, and there's a competence. And again, I think managers want to know that they're doing the right thing. So I'm pleased to see this and look forward to seeing how we get on rolling it out. Comments from staff side or trade unions? David Threadgold.
Thank you, Chair. We've been really involved in this programme, you know, through its creation, and just to echo that, we're really quite pleased with it from my perspective, and I think there's real potential here to make this, I think, what Katie hopes it will eventually become. And that was really all I wanted to say. Thank you. It's a good news story as far as we're concerned. Thanks.
Thank you for that encouragement. So thank you. And it's always helpful, I think, when people come to me, clearly we need to have everyone's voice, and it doesn't matter if there's differences or disagreements, but I think what is really important is when papers come to us, if the staff side can say that they've been involved. You don't necessarily need to know that everything's fully supported or everything's agreed. That would be ideal, but it's always helpful to have that assurance that there's been involvement of staff organisations. I did know who is still with you, Katie, in terms of your leadership matter phase 2.
It is, thank you. So paper in front of you is a 6-month progress and evaluation. I think we've covered your leadership matters on a number of people committees before. I think what I would just remind is a 21-month programme. We've had 2,127 participants so far through that. The overall cost to the organisation is circa 1.5 million, which represents about £300 per head in terms of the investment. 2.2.2 gives high level evaluation, and 2.2.3 is the feedback themes which we'll be taking forward. I think I'd also note, in addition to this paper, we have taken on board comments from staff associations and trade unions, and we will be looking over December and January to see what the possibility would be to pilot a face-to-face of this in kind of probably February, March of next year. There's work we need to do on that, but to pilot that and see what the evaluation is, so that we can make sure that you know, we are doing everything that we can in this space to help colleagues and make sure it lands well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Katie. Board members, comments or questions? Alistair?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, welcome the report. If you look at the 3 papers under this section, it seems to me that what's emerging is an integrated personal development system within the organisation. And I have to say that I really welcome that. And for me, there's 3 strands to it. You know, people need the professional technical development to do the role. And we've had some challenge around that in terms of capacity, you know, with safety training and that, you know, perhaps being paused. You've got the managerial training. We've just had a paper on that managerial training, and you've got the leadership bit. So it's really good to see that developing. So my question would be, and I can see by your face here, Katie, that you know, this is a strategic intent that you have to join all this together. It's that overview and then understanding the capacity that requires, and then viewing it as almost cradle to grave in an organisation, and then not viewing things such as your leadership matters as an event, you know, viewing them something that has to be ongoing, albeit it will require refreshing as challenges change. So are you having that overview, and who's involved in that?
Thanks, Alice. So yes, it is the strategic intent. I mean, as an organisation, you want to get to a point where everything kind of feels connected around what's happening. And actually all of this ultimately is around culture and making sure that we are setting our leaders up for success and that colleagues feel assured and confident in the leaders that we have in our organisation. So actually talking to DCC Spears a little bit earlier about kind of role-related learning that all of us will need, whether you're an officer or a member of staff, as you said, the leadership bit, and then the managerial bit. So how do you manage through, wrapped around by my career, so that we can start to get insight around career paths, career development, demand for training or leadership development. So it does all start to hang together. In some ways, as with other papers that we've had, we need to almost take some of the activity that we've got off the pitch. So, I mean, I used the word signature program earlier, and I used it in a very considered way, so that we get to a point as an organisation where we're really clear on that one page of signature programs that actually are the pieces that we go to, the set pieces that every leader, that every colleague, etc., should be experiencing. So that's the kind of the strategic intent and the direction of travel.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Katie, and can I just comment that I really welcome that, you know, all this work, and you know, it's complex and it takes time, and culture, as you say, is the key to it. But that focus is really welcome. So well done to everybody that's involved in it, and keep the focus.
I ask Katie, this is a contracted out programme, and often with these development programmes, the richness that the facilitators and those who are delivering the programme, the richness of information that they gain and understand from providing that programme is something that is incredibly valuable to an organisation. So two things: would it be the intention to bring this in-house, or are there particular reasons that, you know, having it provided by external firms is more effective? And how do we capture the organisational learning that will come from it?
I think if I start with the organisational learning, we've been really clear, because of the importance of this for our organisation. The evaluation model that we've worked with the external provider is really robust. So anybody that's kind of worked with, you know, Patrick and levels of evaluation, it is a really comprehensive position that we have here in terms of what that looks like. And we're starting to see some of that evaluation come out in the appendix. With regards to organisational learning, we have the external supplier and everybody that's involved in this that will come through our internal boards, you know, where we'll have really good dialogue, not just about taking it on face value, but what do we need to keep on doing differently. And for example, you know, Federation have been really clear and passionate about, you know, is there an opportunity to do this face to face? We're listening to that. Now we've got a bit of breathing space over Christmas. We're going to look at is that possible? Is it viable to do? So there's a lot of learning that goes on. I think that capacity wise, it's right that it sits with an external supplier at the moment, and it brings a kind of a different level, perhaps, of practice. But going forward, I'm passionate that we can't just say that somebody's been through various pieces of leadership development training and that's it. It's then what happens. So if one of the key pieces in this is around collaboration, what do we then do to make sure that we're putting collaboration into practice? How do you set up kind of networking groups that, you know, cut across, you know, some of the divisions in the organisation? So I think us as an organisation, the next step for us is what next after YLM? How do you keep cohorts running? What does that look like? And that's the bit that we bring in-house and think about how that feeds into, you know, the programme of work that we take forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Comments from staff side colleagues or trade unions? David Threadgold?
Katie's anticipated my little hand, I think. We've been supportive of the concept of this programme from the very start, and as Katie's alluded to, and it mentions in the report, you know, we have provided very specific and very proactively sought out feedback on how it's delivering and how it's landing, highlighting the main challenges which have been from the start, that it's, whilst it's mandatory, the time wasn't protected and that it was being delivered online. We find it almost inconceivable that you can really absorb what the message is whilst the phone's going, all of those things. So it's the first time I've heard that, that the consideration is that we will take this, you know, face to face with, I would assume, smaller numbers to get the maximum benefit from it. Because what I would never have wanted to see, and I'm as passionate about this subject as Katie is, I believe, that this becomes a tick box exercise where we don't actually change the culture of those who we are asking to lead the organisation. Because just for, you know, the feedback that I have had, specific or mainly, I suppose, from sergeants and inspectors, that this is missing the mark at the moment. So I'm really keen to work with the service as part of it, of course, to make this something that people take something away from, that does alter the way that they behave at work and does change the culture of the organisation. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, ASP has been quite critical of the service in the past about the lack of leadership training. So we're really delighted to see this programme come in and us to sustain an approach based on it. We are keen to see different iterations and to see it move forward, as Katie spoke about. There's something to be said, I think, for David's point around about trying to get some face-to-face training in this space. I also think that you know, we know the message that's been presented through Your Leadership Matters. What we don't currently have is any assessment or accreditation as a result of it. So I think those are potentially areas we might like to see developed going forward. But again, as Katie said, we're really well engaged with this and welcome the approach the force has taken to that side of things. Thank you.
Okay, that's grand. Thank you very much indeed. So unless there is anything in terms of other business that people want to raise, I believe that is us concluded the public